In this chapter, we will introduce the cost-benefit analysis. To start with, to understand the importance of such analysis and what we can have such as disadvantages, we'll talk about the controversy as at the start. Then we will introduce the cost-benefit analysis process. We'll talk about discounting. We'll discuss some criticism of cost-benefit analysis and provide some examples. So to start with, we'll start by an example showing the controversy, which is the 1970 Ford Pinto. So in 1970, because of the increase in gas prices, American car buyers were looking for smaller but more efficient models of cars in order to reduce the consumption of fuel or gas. And for this reason, Ford president decided to propose a new model, which is, as we can see here, a small car. However, during the testing of this car, they noticed a design problem in the fuel tank because it was exposed and vulnerable to direct impact for high speed, and the tank will present a high risk in case you have a high velocity of the car. And because of this, it can break or we can have leakage of gas or fuel. And because of this, we'll have a high risk of fire. So at this stage, we have to decide if we should solve for this problem and how much this problem will cost. Then, on the other hand, look towards the disadvantages of not tackling such problem, because if we don't fix this, we can have increase in risk of fire, we can have larger number of accidents and a higher number of deaths, etc. So for this reason, what happened is that the industry tried to see what are the, if you want, what are the cost of tackling this design problem, and what is the cost if we don't tackle this design problem. And based on their analysis, they configured out the following. So first, they considered that if we don't tackle this system, we'll have a higher risk of accidents and fires taking place, and therefore we can compute that we have an increase in accident up to 180 burn deaths. In addition, we can have 180 burn injuries, and we can have a total number of vehicles that are completely damaged as 2,100 burn vehicles. And based on this, they considered that because of insurance, of course, it's not ethical at all to consider burn deaths just by the amount of insurance paid. So here, this is why we are questioning the idea of doing a cost-benefit analysis without considering ethics or without considering other issues that are much more important than money. So if we just want to think about money, we might say, okay, it's fine. So if we have 180 burn deaths, 180 burn injuries, and 2,100 burn vehicles, so in total, we can consider for each unit cost of death, what is the insurance to pay, for each injury, what is the insurance to pay, and for the vehicles that are burned, what we should pay. And in total, the total cost then will be $49 million. On the other hand, if we consider the case of not of tackling the problem, and if we want to fix the design, the problem design was really simple, and you can just pay per unit $11. But the problem is that the amount of production was really high. So you have for let's say a certain mode of car, for car sales, you have number of unit is 11 million, and for light truck sales you have 15 million. So in total, when they computed the total cost was around $137 million. So if we want to just think economically without considering the ethics, then we'll say that if we want to fix the design problem, we should pay $137 million. While if we want to not fix the problem and allow for increase in burn deaths or burn injuries, then we'll pay for $49 million. So if we just think about money, then we'll opt with the first option. Okay, and here also there is a certain controversy in thinking. So sometimes we can say, no, in this case, if we opt for the first consideration, and we will not we don't want to fix the design, we'll say that few people will have disadvantage of this, but they will suffer a lot. And it's a big suffer, and the effect of death of people will highly impact their families, etc. But some people think, but it's a small number. While if we want to go to the second option, it's true that it's a little bit of suffering. Will suffer a very small amount, because just will pay $100 per unit, but because of the high number of units to take into consideration, will have a really high cost. So of course here, if we think now ethically, of course we should pay 137 million and not have any increase in deaths. Maybe just one death is the worst of more than 137 million. But at the time, because the decision was mainly by the institution, by Ford institution, they decided to not tackle the design problem and to keep the cars as they are. And because of this, if you explore what happened, we had really a high number of fires and accidents of cars due to fire. And the estimated number of deaths was really close to the real one. The estimation was good, but the decision was not. They decided to not fix the design, and based on this, what happened was really bad, and we had a lot of accident because of fire causes. Okay, so this is a small example will tell us the importance of not only considering cost-benefit analysis. It's one factor that might be taken into consideration, but we should not take the decision based only of this, because we have a lot of things that cannot be monetized. We have a lot of things that doesn't have a price, but are very important in life, like ethics, like standards, regulations, etc. So now we'll introduce the cost-benefit analysis process. What are the different steps to perform the CBA? So first, we should specify a proposal or set of alternative proposals. And for example, here in the example we were given, they were studying two possibilities. We should fix the design of the car, or we should not fix it. And for both cases, they listed the costs, and then they compared the total. Of course, why it's not enough to take this into consideration? Because as we said, not everything can be quantified by money. So you have, let's say, life of people is very important and cannot be we cannot just consider the insurance to pay. It's much more than that. So this is why we always say that ethics, standards, and regulation should always be taken into consideration in addition to the cost analysis. In a second step, we'll be screening whose benefits or costs count. So what are the different costs? What are the different benefits that we should account for? And as we discussed before, when we considered economic and financial analysis, we said that in economic analysis, we consider only, let's say, cost for the owner, okay, and income for the owner, without considering the society. However, whenever we have a public project, we should take into consideration all impacts on the society. So in the CBA analysis, we'll consider the different impact, cost and benefit on the society level. So after this, we should determine what are the impacts and measurement indicators that can be helpful into performing our cost benefit analysis. After this, we will quantify the impacts and monitor these issues. And after, discount cost and benefits should be considered, because you know that to take into effect the time, we always need to determine discount rates. And discount rates in CBA method is much more challenging than in financial method. We have developed already how to calculate the WACC. It was a really simple procedure. However, in case of CBA, it's a little bit more complex, and we have several approaches to do this. Next, we should compute the net present value of each alternative. So already here we know a little bit, it's very close to what we did in financial analysis, but now we'll do it for in cost benefit analysis. We can compare net present values, and we can perform sensitivity analysis in order to recommend the convenient project alternative to take and continue with. So now, let us go over the different steps. So as we said, the first step is to specify the proposal or set of alternative proposals. So CBA will begin with specifying the project or project's policy, program, or technology at hand, indicating the project that needs analysis relative to some predefined statu quo, or indicating the two or more projects that would be economically assessed relative to one another. So sometimes you have a lot of alternatives to start with. Okay, so we can consider the most important alternatives after a certain criteria of selection, and then for these remaining alternatives, we'll conduct CBA in order to help us into the decision. So now, as we mentioned, in cost-benefit analysis, we should take a society-wide perspective where all the benefits and costs should be included, consisting of private, social, direct and indirect, tangible and intangible. Okay, so when we talk about intangible, so not traded in the marketplace. So in other words, the cost-benefit analysis will seek to account for all costs and benefits, regardless to whom they accrue and whether or not they are accounted for in the financial account. And this is one of the most challenging part of the cost-benefit analysis, because you know that whenever you want to consider the society-wide perspective, you have a lot of factors to take into consideration. Okay, and whatever you do, sometimes you still have some factors that you cannot take into consideration, especially as we talked about, and you have a lot of factors that cannot be just tackled by a cost, by money. Okay. Now, after this, we should consider the impacts, and we should select measurement indicators. So the third indicated step in cost-benefit analysis is to list the physical impacts, both inputs and outputs of the proposal as either cost or benefit, and select their respective measurement indicators. So we need sometimes measurement indicators to help us into performing the cost-benefit analysis. Now, one of the disadvantages in CBA is that it is interested only in impacts that affect the utility of individuals, meaning that only when human beings have the relevant knowledge and information to make rational valuations will impacts be accounted for, while impacts without any value to human beings are excluded. What do we mean by this? And here, whenever we talk about the society perspective, a human being is the center of this perspective. So anything that should be taken into consideration should affect the human being in a certain way. Okay, and we disregard any other issue. And for example, you know, let's say for animals, you have animals that the number of animals that are decreasing. You have some animals that we just have maybe one or two, we still have them on the earth. So for the environment or for the animals, if we go to the animals perspective, it's very important to have these species and to preserve them. However, if we just account for human being benefits, maybe they don't care if we don't have these animals anymore. So in CBA, the human being is mainly the most important part, and everything is related to it. Okay, so if you want, the cost of, let's say, a certain animal will be depending on how human being can benefit from it. So even the intrinsic value, which is the value of something in and of itself alone, of any regarded species of flora or fauna, for example, is valued through what a person would be willing to pay to preserve that species, and not to the importance of this species. So, for example, Asian tiger, okay, is an individual tiger that is worth more than its weight in gold on the black market, only because the legends of Oriental medicine claims that eating variable parts of a tiger has near magical effects for the wealthy who can afford it. So we just consider the cost of this tiger as very high, not because we don't have a high number of these tigers, but because it have a very good effect on health of people. So this is why we say that CBA analysis is mainly focused on human being and will consider cost of everything depending on how human being will profit from this. Now, after this, we should quantify the impact and monetize them. So the first step of CBA is to quantify all impacts of the proposal in each time period and monetize those impacts. This would undoubtedly include the prediction of impacts into the future, as proposal's lifetime would, more times than not extend years, if not decades, into the future. You know that when we introduced the course, we talked a lot about sustainability. Okay, so we don't only care for the current effects of a project, but also we should consider future effects. So let's say if you have high CO2 emissions in a project, we should consider how this will affect the atmosphere, how it will affect the greenhouse gas emissions and the global warming effects, etc. So we should go beyond sometimes the lifetime of the project in order to consider the effect on the future individuals, future society. So much of the uncertainty in CBA lies in trying to predict the cost and benefits that occur in the future. You know from previous analysis that whenever we deal with future, we should consider the time effect. And considering the time effect is really challenging because we need to determine how time will affect, if you want, costs and benefits, and selecting an appropriate parameters to take time into account is not really simple to do. Okay, that's why this will be a challenging step in the CBA. So, as we mentioned, we should always take into consideration whenever we want to quantify the impacts. Of course, we have the economical, if you want, the economical level of the project is very important. We need to know how much we gain. We need to know the benefits, but also on the other hand, the preservation of environment is really important. And as we said in CBA, we just consider things just related to human being, and we will consider the environmental effects, but which are related to the health of the current and future generation. So it's not easy also to put impacts because we need to take into consideration what is more important for us, the economical or environmental costs. Now, also, whenever we talk about CBA, we should be able to identify the different goods. So we should know the difference between public versus private goods. Excludable goods in general are goods that can be, if you want, that can be used for certain person, not by all people. Okay, so they are restricted to be used by certain, sometimes by one person or sometimes by several persons. So when we say rival, this means that we cannot share them. So an example of excludable rival good is the car, the phone, etc. While non-rival excludable goods are goods that can be shared by a certain part of people. So let's say you want to go to the cinema. Not all people can go to the cinema. You have a condition, you have a restriction, you should pay the ticket. Okay, so we can consider that non-rival excludable goods are collective or club goods, for example, ecosystem, touristic, etc. While for non-excludable, so as we said, everyone have access to them. If rivals they are specific for certain people, yeah, you have one person can have them, while non-rivals they can be shared. So let's say public goods as clear air, scenic views, etc. The road, for example, everyone can share the road. It's a non-rival, non-excludable good. Now, when we want to assess the total economic value, okay, we should take into consideration several values. So you have first the direct value, so which is the case when the output is consumed directly. So this part is, if you want, the first stage. You have the indirect use value, which is the functional benefits. So you can take into consideration the ecological functions, fluid protection, carbon fixing, etc. You have also the use value under uncertainty. So sometimes you should consider future use value. So as we mentioned, we are not only interested into society of current generation, but also into future generation because of sustainability. Other type of economic value is the non-use value. So sometimes a pure existence can add a value. So especially if you have a small, and for certain, let's say if we talk about something that is not present in high quantity, the existence of it is already a value. So this is the value from knowledge of continued existence. So we can talk about preservation of biodiversity, habitat, species, etc. You have the bequest value, which is the value from knowledge of preservation for future generation, not only for current time. Now, we know that one of the most important parameters in conducting the CBA is the discount rates. Okay, so discount costs and benefits should be done to obtain present value, and this is one of the most challenging steps, which is the selection of the appropriate discount rate. So the fifth step in a CBA is to discount costs and benefits to obtain the present value. The social discount rate is a highly influential parameter in the calculation of the present values of costs and benefits that may occur in the future. And we'll see together some possible strategies for calculation of the discount rate. So to start with, we know that the discount rate is a highly influential parameter in the calculation of the present values of costs and benefits that may occur in the future, as in the case of the benefits and costs to a lesser extent of the assessed microgenerators. Furthermore, individuals reveal their time preference rate through market decisions such as lending and borrowing through the real interest rate of such activity. However, when we consider society as a whole, it is the willingness of society to trade consumption now for later over longer periods of time which defines the social rate of time preference. Okay, so we already discussed before, if you have if you are doing a project in the private sector, okay, mainly the owner of the project can decide or to have, let's say, a mixture of debit and equity, or to have completely debit, etc. And we said that for the debit, we consider interest rate of banks, and for the equity we consider the rate of market. So these are the parameters which will affect the discount rate in case of economic analysis. While in financial analysis, which consider a society perspective, it's much more complex to decide for a rate. So for CBA, it is the social rate of time preference which should be applied in the analysis, given that it is the society-wide costs and benefits that are of interest. Now, employing the accurate discount rate or discount rate for performing the cost-benefit analysis. However, discounting is subject to different views held by economic practitioners. The selection of the appropriate social discount rate, which is the social rate of time preference, is rather more a subjective choice than a concrete science. That's why we don't have one approach to select the discount rate. We'll see together that we have several approaches to help us into selecting a certain discount rate whenever we want to perform the cost-benefit analysis. And this selection is bounded by variable philosophical and economic judgments and predictions of the future state of the economy, among other parameters. So to start with, we all know that people will always prefer benefits now rather than later because of several conditions and causes. So first, there is a positive capital productivity, where output is generated from capital through time. What we mean by this, so if I have money now, I can invest with this money, I can put the money in the bank, so I can have a certain capital productivity. So this is why I always prefer to have money now than later. Another cause is that even supposing a zero capital productivity, so even if I will not gain any amount from money that I have, people display impatience in order to have money now because of the time preference. So even if I will not gain, this will give me like safety or insurance that I have money. In addition, there is a risk of death argument, which can be included in the impatience category by dividing impatience into pure impatience and risk of death impatience. So because also we have always risks, so what we have the risk of death of a person, we have a lot of other possible risks that will not allow us to have this money after. This is why we consider that it's always better to have money now than after. So there is a risk also an uncertainty argument of discounting that can also be added to the impatience argument, that benefits in year 2 or 3 or 4 and so forth would actually be there. We cannot be sure that we'll have these benefits in the future. Now, we have several approaches in order to compute the discount rates that will be used in the cost-benefit analysis. One famous equation is the Ramsey equation, which is an equation that can give the variation of the social rate with time. So S of t is defined as the social rate of time preference, and it is equal to the rate at which individuals discount future utility or well-being P plus the multiplied elasticity of marginal utility and the rate of growth of consumption per capita at time gt. So first, we said that as the first aspect, okay, we always tend to prefer to have money now than after. So one of the most important factors in assessing the social rate of time preference ST is to consider P, okay, which will consider the preference of people to have money now than after. Plus, okay, we have the what we mean by the marginal utility is that marginal utility is the added satisfaction of a consumer from having one more unit of a good or service. Okay, so sometimes we consider that in general, whenever you have, let's say, when you do the first consumption, this is for you. For you, it will be the highest satisfaction, and the cost for you will be, and you are you can say, I will pay, let's say, for this sandwich now $10, but if I want to eat another sandwich, for me it's just worth $5, because we consider that the consumer satisfaction will be the maximum when having for the first time the good or service. Okay. So the concept of marginal utility is used by economists to determine how much of an item consumers are willing to purchase. We can consider, let's say, if you have this item, the probability of saying I want to buy another one will be smaller. So this is why the marginal utility will affect the social rate of time. Plus, that the law of diminishing marginal utility is often used to justify progressive taxes. So we start to put, let's say, some taxes. We try to, in order to increase the income, etc. And marginal utility will not always be, if you want, decreasing. And you can have, sometimes it can be positive, sometimes it can be negative or zero, depending on what is the product and how the analysis is performed. So here in the Ramsey equation, we can consider that we take into account the individual discount future utility of well-being P and the marginal utility by considering mu times GT, where GT represents the growth of consumption per capita at a certain time. Now, considering P will be comprised mainly of two elements: the rate of pure time preference, because we know that always in general, we prefer to have, let's say, money now than after, so which will affect the discount rate. And we have the catastrophe risk through the relationship P equals to T minus M. What do we mean by the catastrophic risk, L? So L has been defined mainly in two alternative ways. The first is for an individual, and it is the risk of that individual's death. So it's an aggregation of risk of death for individuals across society, which justifies discounting future streams of consumption. The second is focused on the life chances of whole generations. So it is calculated by indicating the proportion of a generation that dies each year. So L represents the rate of growth of life chance. It is negative due to the fact that if life chance get worse through time, then this makes for a higher rate of time preference, whereas if they get better, then this argues for a lower rate of time preference. So the second part of the Ramsey equation will commence with the elasticity of marginal utility of consumption. And as we said, the marginal utility of consumption is the change of utility over the change of consumption. And this is assumed to be positive, yet decreasing in consumption. The value of mu could be retrieved by either observing how individuals wish to transfer consumption across time, so individual saving behavior, or by seeing society's judgment about how we should transfer consumption across people at different times. The final parameters in the Ramsey equation is the rate of growth of consumption. So as you see, it's not a simple equation, and this equation involves several parameters that are not simple to compute. So this is why accounting for discount rates in CBA is much complex than for the case of financial analysis. Now, the relative agreement in what affects the discount rate, regarded here as a dependent factor, is met with disagreement as to the values of these independent parameters. So we know that we should account for the discount rate, but the approach to account for it are really variable, and we have several possible methods to assess the discount rates. Already we mentioned it's not just a science. You have always some subjective issues in the consideration of the discount rate. So this agreement occur over the choice of the discount rate, including the parameters of pure time preference, marginal utility of capital, and economic growth level. So these functions, okay, will vary, let's say,